Good morning, and Christos was crazy. I want to speak not merely about a war, but about a deception, the theatrical gesture cloaked in religious symbolism and diplomatic language. This Easter weekend, Vladimir Putin suddenly declared a 30-hour ceasefire in Ukraine, but in truth, the missiles have never stopped flying, nor have the drones fallen silent. Zelensky, in his Easter message, offered a contrast so stark that it must be heard. Evil may have its hour, but God will have his day. That contrast between piety and perfidy, between solemnity and strategy, captures the brutal cynicism of Putin's so called truce. Putin's announcement was as calculated as it was hollow. At 6 p.m. Moscow time yesterday, on April the 19th, he ordered all military activity to halt on humanitarian grounds. Yet within hours, Ukraine recorded, and this is interesting, 387 artillery strikes, 19 ground assaults, 290 drone deployments. That is not a cease. That is not a ceasefire. That is not a truce. Air raid sirens echoed through Kyiv even before the deadline. Zelensky responded with characteristic precision. They are trying to create a general impression of a ceasefire, he said, but in some places they don't even abandon individual attempts to advance. In the Kherson region, drone strikes continued unabated. In Sumy, the earlier missile strike killed 35 civilians preparing for Palm Sunday. This wasn't a ceasefire. This is theatre. This is crafted for headlines and international optics, aimed particularly at Donald Trump and those naive enough to mistake silence in Moscow for sincerity in Ukraine. This war didn't begin, indeed, in 2022, and nor will it end with a press release. The roots of the invasion go back decades. Since Ukraine's independence in 1991, its military capacity, its capability has been systematically diminished, not by Russia directly, but by internal neglect and external manipulation, allowing it to become victim to its larger neighbour. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine inherited thousands of nuclear weapons. By 1994, under the Budapest Memorandum, it gave them up, trading arsenal for assurances. Russia, Britain, and the United States promised to uphold Ukraine's territorial integrity, and that promise dissolved in Crimea in 2014 and was buried in the Donbass in 2022. Zelensky has made it clear. Ukraine lost 225 air defense systems after independence, not in battle, but in bureaucratic delay, decay, and false peace. This wasn't an accident, it was a preparation for invasion. And Russia's manipulation of ceasefires is an historical constant. In January 2023, it announced a Christmas truce, only to bomb civilian infrastructure in Kharkiv. Since 2014, Moscow has broken at least 25 such agreements, often proposed by itself, always blaming Ukraine for continuing to push the front line. Each step is not a step towards peace, but a tactic of repositioning, of narrative control. This Easter, Putin stood in an Orthodox cathedral holding a candle while his army shelled border villages. He invoked historical Rus, the imperial mirage that justifies every war crime, and meanwhile Patriarch Kirill sanctified the campaign as a holy mission, marrying nationalism with religion to devastating effect. In contrast, Zelensky's Easter address didn't invoke vengeance, it invoked memory, humility, and the hard-earned faith of a besieged people. We are walking a very hard path, he said, but the key word is walking, overcoming. He asked not for applause, but for silence, real silence, the kind that brings the hum of generators to a stop, the kind that lets children sleep through the night, the kind that has not existed in Ukraine for 1,152 days. This is not a war for land, this is a war for memory, for identity, for the right to exist free from lies, masquerading as treaties and truces that are little more than a PR campaign from the Kremlin. So let's call Putin's Easter ceasefire for what it is, a blasphemy in political dress, posing in a religious context, an insult not only to Ukrainians but to every concept of diplomacy and decency. And let us recognize that Ukraine's war of survival began long before 2022. Peace cannot be built on propaganda, it must be built on truth. And if Easter teaches us anything, it's that the resurrection comes not from illusion, but from enduring the night and rising again with clarity and hope.